Welcome to Lit Happens, Unpacking Senior English. I'm Adriel.
And I'm Belle.
We're experienced English teachers dedicated to supporting both new and experienced educators in a world in which we are often time poor, to empower our students to excel in their English studies.
If you're an English teacher, like us, navigating this curriculum, then this podcast is designed with you in mind. And our mission really is to break down the complexities by unpacking English nationally.
Welcome back to Lit Happens episode 47, and today we are going to be talking about one of our resources that we have up and coming for our wonderful listeners. I know that Belinda, how are you today?
Hi, good, thank you. How are you?
That's good.
I think everyone's getting tired and in the lead up to like Christmas season and all of that stuff.
Yeah. It's definitely that time of the year now, isn't it? Like,
definitely.
Everyone's sort of winding down, everyone's cleaning up their faculties, and here we are talking about a brand new program, which probably people are going to be delving into, I guess, as they spend a little bit of their holiday break, being assigned some of these helter-skelter programs, which is where I know you've been working very hard creating a lot of these resources for our listeners.
Thank you.
Today, we are going to be talking about one of them in particular, which is our Reading to Write resource, which some teachers will have seen or heard about in the up and coming few weeks, as per our last few episodes. But look, before we get started, let's get into our lit or quit for this week. And for today's lit or quit, we are going to be talking a little bit about the unit itself. And Well, what do you reckon? Should the Reading to Write module be renamed to something that better reflects its conceptual depth? Maybe something like reading, composing, or reimagining? Would that be lit or would that be quit?
Oh, this is a really interesting question because I like the unit name Reading to Write because it is quite straightforward and it's very adaptable. You could rework old things and make them new and fresh again. Although what I do like about this is it's acknowledging that there's like a conceptual depth, which there is even more so now, I think, because of the new outcomes and specifically the understanding and responding content points. So in terms of do I think it needs to be renamed? I don't think so. I like the Reading to Write because it's very open that way, and so I think teachers could support students into a specific interpretation of it. But what I do think we probably should take away from this, and I know we're going to be talking about it in our new program that we have that we're going to be releasing as a resource for everybody, is looking at how the outcome points, which are quite conceptual and are more specific than we were used to in the previous syllabus, how we can actually use them to perhaps add that extra depth to the Reading to Write topic. I don't know if I can answer lit or quit for this one. I'm going to say does it need to be renamed? But we do need to consider how we make it conceptual, and we're really excited to be sharing this program that we've spent a lot of time creating for our listeners as part of our Lit Happens program. And it's got a combination of all the things we've been discussing. So, doesn't need to be renamed, but definitely need to consider. What do you think?
I definitely don't think it needs to be renamed. I think a nice, short, sharp unit name like Reading to Write is basically that practical skill that we're addressing. So it's definitely short and sharp. But as you mentioned, with the adjustments to the new sort of syllabus as per the outcomes and the skills that we're looking to assess, I think that conceptual depth will definitely be touched upon. But look, I would do a quit on that. I definitely don't think it needs a renaming because our kids these days need just short, sharp, simple sort of, this is what you're doing. So Reading to Write, this is why reading's important. In one sort of facet. So for me, it would be a quit. But interesting sort of question, which you're going to delve into, I guess, and unpack a little bit more as we do go into looking at our resource over the course of the next half an hour or so. But let's jump in. Let's dive in. And let's start off with our episode for today, which will start off with the following question. So what conceptual foundations shape the unit, and how can we hook our audience, I guess, into the more module audience being the students and even
Yes.
some of the teachers. And as for our viewers on YouTube, we're going to pop up a little bit of a sample size for our reading to write unit that, again, Belle has been working away very diligently on over the course of, put many hours in, so you guys don't have to. So we'll
Yes.
pop that up on screen for our YouTube listeners. And if you are
Yes.
listening via podcast or Spotify or Apple Podcast, wherever you're listening, be sure to jump on and have a little bit of a look if you want to see what our units do look like. So we'll pop that up there now, and we'll be ready to go there, Bill. So
Perfect.
let's dive into this question.
All right. Let's dive. Okay, it's a good question. So anyone who is, like you said, watching along, you can see that we've got a very blank unit scope and sequence here. That way, that's just a nice visual, I think, for you guys to get a sense of what it's going to look like. But I'm actually going to, and sorry about my mouse clicks, try my best here, but I'm actually going to take you to the scope and sequence that we have created specifically for the advanced reading to write unit. So we've tried to create a one-page scope and sequence and then a weekly program with aligned outcomes and activities. And so in the next 2 episodes, we're going to be taking you through that. But what we want to, I think, consider first is, what are we actually trying to do here? And that's what's inspired the actual scope and sequence, the weekly format, the driving questions. We're going to take you through that. But what has inspired it is obviously the rubric, right? So at the heart of this rubric is this idea of reading to write and the relationship between reading and writing. And we know that critical and creative writing is a focus here. But when we're talking about what conceptual foundations, we are considering here, like, what's the topic or the aim? And so if you're looking at the rubric, it's this idea of how do we help students connect to ideas, relationships, endeavors, and scenarios. Okay, and so as an example, you might be using a specific concept to structure that. So you could be doing your belonging or your change on your journeys, whatever you select. I've heard of new ones like transformation, identity, things like that. Whatever you select, we've made our program here quite generic text-wise, but specific to the content from the outcomes, so that no matter what your text is, there's going to be some really good, outcome aligned activities that work here. So before I just blab around and continue, so the focus here then is really, you can see that in the scope, we've got the rubric out there dotted down. We've got the box that covers, I'll just see if I've zoomed out a little too much here so that everyone can see. How's that looking? Is that okay? Is that clear to everyone?
Yeah, I think so. We'll be able to hear them when we listen to the comments.
So
looks good.
Yes, absolutely. So we've got like concepts and driving questions that really are underpinned by that rubric. So you can see we've got the idea of like how do texts represent ideas, relationships, endeavors, scenarios, how they shape perspectives through authorial choices, and how students can develop insights into the world around them. Those, I think, the big facets of the actual rubric. So we've tried to make sure that we underpin that. So we'll talk about the driving question in a moment, but also one thing here might be to consider is which English textual concepts are being represented through the specific outcomes and through the rubric. So, we've definitely got perspective, representation, style, code and convention. I'm going to talk about genre a little bit further down as well. But what we tried to do here is in this scope and sequence is just create a weekly phase and structure of learning to really guide the way that the outcomes can come out and the way that the rubric can be reflected. So, we've done that. We've listed the weeks 1 to 10, and obviously we're going to start taking you through that shortly. But we also wanted to align them with the specific outcome content points. So on the right, you'll see that the content points are listed in the overview. In brackets is the specific outcome that they correlate. And this is just a really good visual for you guys to see what the big picture is. And then the weekly activities will start taking you through specific ways to exemplify that. So we've really tried to merge weekly topics with the actual phases and relate it to the content from the outcome, so that it's all really nicely correlated here. So ultimately, some of the driving questions might be something like, how do texts demonstrate the power of language to represent ideas and shape perspectives? So these driving questions are really helping emphasize the conceptual nature of the topic, of the unit or the rubric, which we just talked about in Lit Happens. But really, it is reading to write. So what does a language look like? What do writers do? How do I read effectively for a range of purposes? How can I draw on this stuff as a writer myself? And this is where we're really, especially in this week one that I'm gonna give you a visual of shortly, we're really trying to engage, well, what is reading to write? What's the relationship? So before I jump into that real quickly, I think that's kind of our overview of the scope and sequence of the terms learning on the one doc. Yeah. Is there anything else you think, Adriel, I might have missed there or you want to cover?
I think just simply put, guys, like as you all know, this does take a lot of thought, programming, and I've made it very clear in my comments and my sort of dialogue in previous sort of episodes that I do not enjoy programming whatsoever. But what I can see is Belle has definitely, like, what we've seek to sort of look to do is simplify it as best as possible so that everything is streamlined for you. And we can see that this is done for usability as opposed to just trying to put a whole heap of different information there. It's like what is necessary. And you guys can use this resource as a stepping stone into adapting it to your needs for your school in particular. And that's sort of like the goal that we have with this development. So it is very structured. It is quite simple to follow. It's an easy to use resource. So what I would encourage our listeners to do is just share this around. It'll support us as well as we venture into this sort of space, because it will definitely be beneficial to you. And again, we've been teaching in the classroom for a little while now, and we sort of know from the teacher's point of view what we want, where we have it. We still teach as well. So we do this additionally on top of, our day-to-day lives and our working in school. So it's definitely a thing that we would love a little bit of support in as well, I guess. Even like your constructive sort of things as to what has worked well. But Belle has definitely simplified this. It's easy to follow. But focus has been on usability. So it's been fantastic there, Belle. So I guess we can then move on to the next thing, because you have covered, what is it that draws our audiences into it. But let's move then into our second sort of question here, which is, how do we help the students understand and connect through the use of this module, sort of the module requirements through the use of this resource that you've been working away on?
Absolutely. So, if you are watching via YouTube, you can see that we are going to leave up there the week one program table. So what we've tried to do is divide it by the weeks and the phases. So like Adriel said, it has that user accessibility. So, in case you want a visual of what our resource looks like before you hopefully rush out to purchase it, which we'll talk about later where to do that. What we tried to do was, again, have it very clear and straightforward. So you'll see that we've got the weekly focus, we've got what phase is embedded, we've got a sample driving question that you can use, and perhaps the textual concepts that correlate. And then the left-hand column has the relevant outcomes with the content point, and then on the right is an activity for at least one of those outcome points. So what we've really tried to do is map the weeks with the phases, and then the outcomes within the phases, and then the activities. So, today we're talking about weeks 1 to 4, which is really more of your understanding content points. And then in our next episode, we'll be talking about weeks 5 to 10, which is more of our composing. But so in terms of how we're helping students understand and connect with the module. Okay, first week 1 was really the hook and the introduction to the concept. We had some writing and journal activities. As we move forward now, we want to actually look at the module requirements. So, we still tried to have a driving question here that's relevant to the rubric, because this is going to be a big focus here. Yeah, so as I'm, excuse me, sorry guys, I've had a bit of a cold, so bear with me. So we're looking at, how writers use language, structure, and genre to shape meaning, how they're going to influence the readers, and how we're going to help them connect with the text. So we're still kind of getting a bit of a toe in the water for structure, style, genre, representation. But here, I might just have to, so I can see it. Here we go. So, what we thought was, well, we've got our first outcome with the aesthetic qualities of text. So this is where, sorry, I think I'm looking at week 1. I'll just talk about it real quick. So in week 1, we're doing those hook activities. Yeah, okay, cool. We're doing those hook activities. We're doing those quote reflections. We might be doing some gallery walk activities where we're trying to prep for imaginative ideas and insights. And this might be a nice activity to also do a bit of a short extract, just to engage students in the concept or the specific idea or the specific part topic that they're going to focus on. And this might be a good way to get a sense of your students' skills as readers. And then we did put a little writing activity in there as well that hits outcome 4 and 5. And so this is a nice little moment that changed me free imaginative writing activity that is still trying to engage some of the deeper concepts that, they're going to be looking at across the module there.
And it's very it's very important, like you just said, in terms of the phase that you've sort of discussed. You're looking at all those critical skills, which again you've simplified. We've sort of tried to make adaptable, and it's all practical. I think that's probably the big thing about these programs that we're going to start churning out. It's practical. You can sort of plug in and play, and there's this fantastic sort of way in which our teachers can, and just hopefully have that usability, which saves you guys a little bit of time, especially when it comes to your programming at school. So look, it's looking good there, Bill. But go on. You were going to expand a little bit more, I think, in regards to the students.
Yeah. So just quickly, as we get into then, our question here for the students. So in week 2 here, we've got some activities here that are guided towards the specific rubric and outcomes attached to reading to write for advanced. So, we've got a couple of activities there. We've got some rubric vocabulary sort where, they're going to really delve into the key terms, and we've got some activities that go with that. We've also got a little close reading mini lesson activity where you might be able to model a bit of annotation and see where you can identify aspects related to the rubric there, just to make it visual. And then also we've got some activities here related to genre, because anybody who is programming for this will see that in the outcomes there is a focus on genre here. So it's important we don't neglect it. So we've also put a couple of activities here where, depending on whatever genre you're going to incorporate with your related text and or your core text, in this week, students get an opportunity to not only see what that looks like and quickly refresh their skills here, but also our driving question for that week is this idea of how writers are using language, structure, and genre to not only shape meaning and influence readers, but also in a way, how might it connect to, other texts or ideas represented amongst texts? So in this second week, they're really unpacking that rubric, and, we're using perhaps some short text to engage that the way we would maybe in the old school version of reading to write. So, I think that's what kind of phase 2 in week 2 looks like, just to get students in that unpacking and starting to understand phase.
Yeah, I like the fact that a lot of those thoughts that drive that aspect of the unit actually get students to think beyond the literal, which is probably one of those struggles that we will definitely have as teachers, because everything is literal these days to our students. So hopefully, again, we're addressing a lot of these things through some of those driving questions, through the activities. And I know, it also depends on, your school structure. Again, there is a lot of adaptability here, even though we've got, a program with a variety of activities. and then pick and choose what works for you, adapt it to what works for you. And this is sort of the premise
Yeah.
behind this unit. But yeah, no, that sounds good there, Bill. So let's then move on to our next sort of phase here. We're looking at like phase 3 of
Yeah.
this episode. So this is part 1, guys, of a 2-part ep. So next week's episode, we'll discuss a little bit further. But our third question for today is how do we help students understand or build that, connect with the module requirements, but also when we look at the next part there, how do we help them to build analytical and critical engagement in that next phase there?
Yeah, good question. Good question. So obviously phase 1 and 2, we're getting them connected and we're understanding, but phase 3, I think, is where your, stronger analysis and engagement kind of kicks in. So in our program, we've split phase 3 across 2 weeks, 3 and 4, so that you can get that, introductory level of analysis in here. So what we wanted to focus on in this one is getting the students to engage, personally and analytically with the text. So in this phase here, I put 2 driving questions because one is really geared towards the critical engagement. And then I've put a second one that's tied to the creative engagement, because what we have tried to do in this program is embed some creative activities alongside the critical ones when the students are analysing, so that we've got that relationship between we're reading and we're understanding, but how is that informing us or encouraging us to write as well alongside that? Because usually the final task for this is a creative component. So we'll get to that. But the first driving question that's more critical: how do composers use stylistic choices and contextual influences to shape meaning and position their audiences? So you can hear by the language in this rubric, guys, that this is very much an advanced English style of reading to write. There's a separation. So obviously we're going to be releasing a standard English one as well. That's a bit different because the aspects of it is different. But yeah, we've got this real deep, trying to get students to have this critical engagement with not only what are these aesthetic qualities, but what it's the relationship between a reader, a writer, a text, the context, and perhaps how it impacts audience. And then also getting them to consider the ways that language features and, text structures and stylistic choices are really going to shape ideas, perspectives, experiences. So in this kind of week 3, we're starting to get into the engagement with probably our core text here. We might be doing some connections back to our related, but some activities that, we've suggested that we might be doing in this week 3 here is getting them to consider this key scene or passage with a core technique, what it represents or what perspective or what idea or experience it might represent, and, how this might position the reader to engage with that in that world. We've also got some contextual lens activity ideas. So, a cool little activity where you might be getting your students to engage in reading the text through its time. So, introducing them to some contextual kind of artifacts that could be articles, images, objects, and getting them in that lens of the environment that produces a text, because we are trying to get them to think about how are writers, or what are writers thinking, I should say, when they're getting into the composition of their text here. So what values or tensions might be appearing, what social issues might be shaping, why a particular genre might be playing out in this time frame. So I know that you've done Great Gatsby in the past for reading to write. So this might be a really good, if you're still doing something like that, a good opportunity for what is happening contextually and how does the genre and style of Great Gatsby align or help to express those contextual issues there.
Yeah,
And
no,
then
that's definitely.
I think sorry, go on.
No, that's definitely very thorough. Keep going.
Yeah. And so I think then as we move through that phase, we've got some activities in here that are on audience positioning workshops. So maybe looking at differing or contrasting excerpts from the text and looking at what the writer's trying to evoke, which language or structural choices are being are guiding us towards this response, what perspective might be perhaps privileged, or is there a marginalized representation here, or what value is being expressed through the ideas or the situations. And students here are going to be in kind of week 4 encouraged to do a bit of like creative rewriting here. So, even something like having a phrase or a sentence or a moment rewritten to position the audience to feel differently or to evoke a different experience or a different emotion. We've also got, genre lenses here, so activities where we're maybe giving our students a genre checklist and then engaging them to identify where the text is conforming to these genre conventions and where it might be actually subverting them. Because again, if you're looking at the outcomes, this is a very specific content point within the reading to write outcome. And then moving on from that, kind of wrapping up that week 3-4 is looking at maybe a writing activity where students are going to choose one of these stylistic features from the extract they did or from a previous activity they did there, and then actually looking, not only reading it by interpreting and considering what impact it's having here, but then also trying to imitate that technique through a little writing activity of their own. And then you could possibly engage in peer feedback here, because I think the important thing that I've noticed really while programming here is it's not going to be enough to just completely use what you were always doing in reading to write, unless you were looking at genre and perspective and value and influence. So if you feel like you were already covering that in a previous unit, that might work. But as you can see in this advanced course, there are very specific kind of benchmarks that you've got to hit within the read to write component here, right? It's very specific in a way.
Yeah, it is very, very sort of direct now, isn't it? Especially, like I said, like with the skills that it's trying to address, as you'll see with how the prescriptive nature of the new prescriptions there, especially for advanced English. So I think it's good in a way, and you definitely have covered quite a few different activities. They're just a bit of a sample size for our listeners. So jump out there and go grab a copy of this to, again, I know it sounds like we're sort of pumping this up as a promotion for us. Yes, we are to an extent, but there is this intention that it is going to be beneficial to each and every one of you listening. It's there to save time.
Absolutely.
It's there to help you out, and that is the core sort of premise of us. It's not just a generic sort of textbook. It's actually prescribed for teachers. It's built by teachers for teachers. So definitely got some great ideas there, Belle, for this 3 phases that we've sort of covered there. Are there any final sort of tips for today's episode that you have in regard to these first 3 phases and what the purpose is and whatnot?
I think you made an excellent point is, this idea of time. So, I've taken some leave this year, so I've been fortunate to have some time to really put that into the programming that I'm coming up with. It is a really big passion of mine. So I've, fortunately have this time to invest in it. And if I can create something that not only brings me joy, but helps other people immensely, that's where this is like a bit of a labor of love in a great way. As you also talked about that idea of skills. So skills is the focus of the new syllabus, but it is and has always been a focus of your teaching and my teaching within an English classroom. Skills always backward mapped whatever we did in the classroom. And so what we've really tried here with this program, not only to make it accessible enough that you could insert whatever text you're teaching and still have aligned activities, but really making sure that the activities that we've suggested in here are really going to help fulfill that outcome and content point. So these activities are absolutely skills-based. they're getting your students to think in a reading to write way, but
Yeah.
also to respond in a reading to write way. So in that regard, we've tried to be really thoughtful, mapped it out, because that does take a long time, days, hours. And we're hoping the fact that we've aligned this makes it a resource that you can take. It can form the bedrock of whatever text you are doing. You know, if perhaps you're doing a unit of work that you have done previously, and like I said, you probably will have to make some amendments here because of the specifications in this new rubric, but this might be a nice resource where you select what you're missing in your previous program and use that to inject, or perhaps you're really strapped for time and this is going to give your unit a clear direction and guidance, and you could just sub in whatever additional activities for your core text is going to work here. So I just really want to express to everybody, thank you for listening, because it is, you know, we all know what it's like when you put something out there that you've kind of created. So I would really love the feedback. I really hope everyone finds this really helpful. This is a program style resource. I am going to be working on a bit of a workbook that you could just present in class or give to your students that aligns with this. So that is on its way. But really, I know from all my friends and colleagues right now who are programming that this is what they're looking at towards the end of this term. And, you know, I've talked to people who are really worried about having to spend majority of their school break, which we know is really essential for R&R. They're worried about how much time they're going to have to spend programming. And so, you know, if I can, you know, if we could just create this resource and put it out there to people that could help them, what better use of our time? Like, I can't think of anything better here. Like, if I can save you guys days and hours and then you've just got to supplement with your specific text, like, that for me is the aim here. And I just really hope it makes things so much more clearer and easier for you guys. So I guess as a last kind of point or tip is to remember that we need to be aligning whatever we're doing here with the outcomes and making sure that our programs are full of skill-based activities. And that's what's really going to help not only build the foundation of high school English, or I should say prelim and HSC English, but really deepen those skills that are then going to apply in the next terms and modules over.
Yeah, that's wonderful. No, thank you for that, Bill. You've been very thorough, and like you said, you know, it does take a lot of time, a lot of planning, and we are definitely trying to help our listeners, you know, with that aspect of teaching. I know, like me personally, I'm still in the classroom, and you know, having to program on top of, you know, having your break, doing your family things, and all that. It's an additional responsibility, and that is one of our priorities as well, is, you know, helping to hopefully alleviate some of those time pressures, which, you know, we appreciate you sort of working in and in making a nice, simple sort of program. As Belle has mentioned to our listeners, we do have workbooks coming out as well. And again, we'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love more communication from you guys in terms of liking and subscribing our socials. Have a view of the YouTube channel here or there if you want to see our wonderful faces, or Belle more so than me. But, you know, it's one of those things that we definitely are encouraged by, and we'll be pumping out a few more resources in the coming few weeks and months, hopefully helping you guys out.
Please check our Teachers Pay Teachers account for that one. We've got the link up all over our socials.
Awesome. So make sure you keep an eye for that, and we'll definitely be hearing from us a little bit more in regards to part 2 in next week's episode of our resource, where Belle will unpack the second half of the term, I guess, for the 10-week term there. And guys, like and subscribe, reach out, and thank you for listening to part 1 of our Reading to Write resource episode. We will catch you guys next week.
Thank you. Bye.